Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good morning and welcome to the Weekly Review. I'm your host, Paul Hazard, and with me this morning is Lucy Newberger, Brent Poland, and John Gibbs. You're all very welcome, everybody.
Morning.
Morning.
Lots of great stories around this week, and we're all looking forward to Christmas, which is coming really rapidly. Well, yes, we are, Lucy, because if you lived in Northern Ireland, you'd realise how many people have got their Christmas tree and lights up already. I think it's dreadful, but anyway. We've got 3 crackers for you this week coming up right after these messages from our sponsors, who are John Catt. And they bring this show to you as part of they are publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools all around the world. Level up your professional development today by visiting johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. And if you like, you can use the code JCTTR2425 and you'll get 20% off. We're also brought to you today by ParentKind. ParentKind are a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parent participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost student attendance, improve behaviour, and enhance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movement that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents. Now, on to our first story.
Outstanding.
The Financial Times claims to have seen documents proposing 10 new areas of assessment, which are curriculum, teaching, achievement, leadership, behaviour and values, attendance, preparation for next steps, opportunities to thrive, inclusion and belonging, and safeguarding. Now, this is in relation to Ofsted and inspections and so on. Currently, there are 4 areas and 4 single-word judgments, we're going to call them, even though one of them is 2 words. They are outstanding, good, requires improvement, and inadequate. Now, this new system and structure then would have 5 judgments for those 10 areas I mentioned a minute ago, and they would be exemplary, strong practice, secure, attention needed, and causing concern. Now, to my mind, there's something very patronizing, gimmicky, belittling, horrible stench to all of this. We're teachers and we're on report card. Like, what are we, school children? Not only that, but, they're proposing to have these cards color-coded. I mean, goodness. I don't know, this really gets my goat now. We're bold boys and girls. We haven't been teaching properly. We need to go on report. And now there are more areas in which we can be smacked and scolded. And I just wonder, would barristers put up with this? But anyway, look, Lucy, this is a gimmick, isn't it? We're teachers. We're not P1s. It's out with the old and in with the old in new clothes. Oh, and a rainbow.
Yeah. I mean, this is, to put it very succinctly, this is exactly the same nonsense in a different hat.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's changed? If anything, this is worse. And it's deeply condescending towards teachers. It's deeply inappropriate. When we were all crying out for, in the wake of everything that's gone on in the last year or so, this is this is not what we had in mind. It's almost as if they've gone, oh, well, okay, there's no thought has gone into this. No listening has happened, with the big listen and everything else and all these other sort of supposedly noble things that Ofsted have kind of put into the world. And this is what they've come up with. Do better.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, they need to do better. They need put on report. Brent, currently there are 4 areas of assessment. There are going to be 10 from next September. What are your thoughts on those 10 areas that I listed a minute ago?
Well, I'm going to repeat the same thing I said after the death of Ruth, the same thing I said with the big list, and the same thing I've said all along. Just abolish Ofsted. Solution. I'm sorry, it's not fit for purpose. And it's every time it keeps talking about reforming, we have pseudo reforms, tokenism, and then just this utter nonsense. It is not fit for purpose. It does not deserve our respect, credence. It does not deserve our complicitness. And I would go so far as to say we ignore it, we boycott it, and we simply bypass it. Simple as that. And that makes me a rebel, and so be it. I have had enough of an organization that has destroyed my profession. It's responsible for the death and the destruction of people's lives, careers. It will not help recruitment and retention. And frankly, this government needs to get a handle on this, because they think this type of PR exercise is going to wash. We're educators, we're teachers, we're not stupid. For God's sake, we educate children. We can see through this sort of nonsense. So they can take their PR and they can kindly shove it where I'm not concerned. Because quite frankly, this is an insult to the profession. This is more than an insult. This is a disgrace. How dare they, after everything, come up with this utter nonsense as if it's going to wash with us? I don't think they understand the thoughts or the feelings of people in the profession. We were promised change. This is not change. And as Lucy's correctly said, if anything, this is worse. We deserve more respect. We will talk about respect later on. We deserve more integrity and respect. We are not a Premier League football organization, referees here. We are teachers. And we deserve a lot more than this type of nonsense. We're trusted with children's futures, and frankly, we are highly trained individuals. Yes, to put up with this. Well, actually, I have, because I'm going to do league tables with them too. Let's put them on league tables, because that works so well for schools. League tables, Ofsteds, report cards, judgments. Get rid of it. It has not worked, and therefore, what's the definition of insanity? Is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So we should reject this completely as a profession and tell them we are not to be judged like this. We need accountability, absolutely, but accountability and fair accountability for what we do as a teacher, and not just categorizing into 10. Why just add in the 11th category and say raising children and be done with it? Or glorified 12. How good is our babysitting skills? Number 12 while they're at it. Because that's what's starting to boil down to. There's more to my job than just 10 things. You cannot quantify what a good teacher does. So yes, like you, Paul, this has really got me going, because I keep saying the same thing every time. Abolish it. Maybe people just need to start standing with people like me and some of the unions and saying enough is enough. Abolish Ofsted and be done with it.
You get a better, more detailed report if you go to buy a house. It's a lot more detail in it, and it's a lot more effective as well. John, Brent raised a couple of things there, and I saw Lucy nodding. Now, we do need some kind of accountability. We need something going on. People need to know. I absolutely accept that. But, who do inspections serve? Is it parents? Is it management? Is it government? Is it to get statistics? And I mean, what's the nature and format of, a proper, more apt and effective and beneficial way of reporting on schools?
Well, who do they serve indeed? And they don't serve any function that you would want them to serve, as Brent so eloquently points out. They don't do the things you'd want them to do. What they do is they have an appearance of doing something for the purposes of appearing to do something. Which is why teachers are often nervous about complaining. As soon as you say, well, we don't want Ofsted, want to get abolished, this sort of thing, they say, well, you need to be, everyone puts up in all walks of life with some form of inspection. And again, as Brent says, we're not against accountability. As if I was a parent, well, no, I'm a parent, and I will say, I don't want to know whether my local fire station is doing a great job with a report card. I don't want to know whether the doctor's surgery is likely to kill me or not. Well, maybe I do want to know that, but I don't want to know about the hospitals and such like. I don't want to know this. I just want to be reassured that as professionals, they have internal mechanisms of accountability, which are grown up and sensible and sophisticated. And if I go to my local hospital, it'll be as good as any other hospital, I hope. What's the point of telling me that their heart surgery is that so many things? The marketization is a highly simplified mechanism driven by ideology, an idea about us as citizens, which is mistaken. So I don't want to know about all I want to know is schools are somehow doing what they do professionally, with accountability within the profession, as you would expect to find in any profession, legal profession or any other profession, the police or whatever, the army, whatever. As long as they're doing what they do. I don't want to know as a parent. And the reason we tell parents these simplistic pieces of nonsense, it's a smiley, let's have a smiley face. Down to an angry
banner
face.
You can put up in front of the school that nobody actually cares about, and there's awful. But you've seen them across certain primary schools. Rated under the LV, outstanding or good or whatever. It's kind of fabulous.
And this will do the same thing. These 5 categories. The top one being exemplary. They'll say exemplary in 9 out of 10, or exemplary, and they'll prioritize the particular. Of the 10 categories, the ones that we think are kind of important and will appeal most to parents, and say outside the school, we're exemplary in whatever things. And you can always tell the banality of something by the number of things people come up with. So why 10? Why 10? Not 9. Did they get to 9 and go, oh, I've got to think of another one. Can't leave it at 9. We've got to round you off at 10. And then someone said, well, I've got another one. Oh no, that makes it an unhelpful 11.
Sorry, John. Ofsted and SATs. What are the purpose of SATs? Is that for the children's benefit? No. That's so government can report how many schools are doing what.
Yes.
Ofsted is a version of SATs, and that is destroying children's love of learning. Exams. What's the purpose of exams?
Data.
Better our children, or to say, here's our PISA league tables. I saw how one government was manipulating figures to prove, we left you a strong education system. In what parallel universe is our education system going forwards? By every single measure, from social mobility to even us on the ground, we can tell you that education is not. We are being overtaken by countries like Estonia. But yet this provides the opportunity for somebody to stand at the dispatch box and say, under this government, education has increased. Look at our inspection records compared to the last government. That's really what this is about. This is a backside covering exercise in order for people to tick boxes and then pecking order push it down on us. And forgetting the fact of the matter is we're expendable. As we saw during COVID how expendable teachers were. So we'll put up with it. If we don't put up with it, then out we go and they'll bring in fresh supply. I don't think they understand how the profession is starting to hemorrhage to the point, or maybe they're just going to replace themselves with AI. This is the grand plan. Get rid of
the silence and compliance thing. Yeah.
What she's saying in some schools and academies, you just stop it, get on with it, and if you don't like it, get out. And that's why recruitment and retention has been so difficult, because people have been driven out by this utter nonsense, driven out by over-examination. I am a teacher. I want to teach. Get out of my classroom and let me do my damn job. And you do your damn job as politicians by giving me the money to do my damn job. And get out of my life. Get out of my classroom and stop telling me. I don't tell my dentist how to drill teeth. I'm not going to tell my doctor how to be a doctor. Don't tell me as a teacher how I'm going to teach. Or I'll tell you as a politician how you should be a politician. And that means being honest for once and for all. Because this is just exactly this is the straw breaks the camel's back for me. We were promised a change to Ofsted, and they haven't delivered. So enough is enough. A line has to be drawn with this, and the profession needs to unite against this. Because if we tolerate this, I think we're on nothing, because they'll think they'll get away with it, and that's my line.
Yeah, this is a crossroads, and we have a real opportunity here. And my fear is if we go down the wrong road, then this really is it for us. I mean, I know that sounds kind of catastrophizing and a bit sort of dramatic, but in the wake of COVID, everything else, change of government, we have a real opportunity to do better, to make things better, to go forward.
Yes.
And this flies in the face of that.
Yeah. Can I have one thought as well? That there's along with these sorts of league tables and so on that appear to be informing the customers, is what parents become, of their local school. It's a distraction exercise. So what we're really hiding is So, for instance, Martin Oliver said, if we let standards slip, we know that it disadvantages it's the disadvantage to suffer. We have an elitist university system. We have private schools which disadvantage people. We have an examination system which gives advantages to some and guarantees the failure of about 30%. There's all sorts of monstrous inequalities and failures in our education system. But this one, look at the puppet. Look at this thing over here. We're telling you what schools are really like in a way that obscures the truth of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad I asked that question. What are inspections for, and who is the audience? Yeah. The ETI that we have, the Education Training Inspectorate in Northern Ireland, once they have issues and difficulties, they're certainly more human. They're very quick to admit that when they go into a school, it's a snapshot. And we've all had kind of snapshots of ourselves where we've had our eyes closed and, funny poses, and they're unflattering and so on and so forth. I'm wondering, just then, about that kind of arrogance of Ofsted that you've all alluded to, which is to kind of, zoom in, to parachute in, to kind of, take those snapshots and then publish on the basis of a snapshot without any sense of, last week, last month, it was different, there was a crisis going on, whatever it was, that bigger, broader kind of sense of the school. And, do they have any consideration or thought for the damage that causes to the school, to the community? Because some people don't have a choice in traveling to a school 10 miles down the road. Do we, as Brent says, do we need Ofsted gone? They need to go?
No, and the market, the idea that parents can choose between schools has always been an illusion. It's just there's a distraction illusion, and it's in that way that choice becomes a kind of fetishized. It's if we must give people choice, just like we must listen to the voice of the people over Brexit or something. It becomes a thing which you're supposed not to be able to argue with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a hot topic, and I know they're still working on it, but I suspect that's going to cause a lot of debate on Monday morning in staff rooms. But on to our next story. Now, our next story, global crisis or storm in a teacup. It's no secret that education and industry don't always see eye to eye. And often celebrated business leaders will take potshots at teachers, who tend on the whole to focus on students and not get involved or embroiled in squabbles. It's happened again this week with Michael O'Leary saying, "There's nothing wrong with teachers. I love teachers, but I wouldn't generally employ a lot of teachers to go out and get things done." This has infuriated trade unions. Even the Irish Prime Minister has got involved, saying he's pretty annoyed about it. And the teachers are people we trust with our most precious possession, our children. It's a tough job. It's an impactful job. And I have nothing but respect for teachers, he says. Now, maybe setting aside the individuals in the specific story, is there any mutual understanding in the relationship between education and industry? And is there any kind of mutual benefit to be had there? Brent, what do you think?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not going to be personal to Michael O'Leary because I think his customer service needs looked at. I wonder if Ryanair ran a school, how would that school operate? It would certainly discriminate against certain individuals because that's the difference, isn't it? He's a businessman.
Simon Harris went on to say that most people would not be able to do 5 minutes in front of a class, let alone 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months. And it was a very, very pointed statement at Michael O'Leary himself.
I wouldn't be able to do 5 minutes for Ryanair without breaking the rules of trying to get more money out of customers and taking advantage of it. That's the difference, isn't it? Is that my job is to treat people equally. My job is not there to make money. It's a difference between capitalism and the public sector, isn't it? My job is to help every individual regardless of their needs, whereas his job is to try and get as much money as possible, as quickly as possible. So that's the issue. The issue is values. What I would say to Michael O'Leary personally is, as an Irishman to another Irishman, I don't think he has the right to fly our traditional Irish flag, because I don't think culturally he is aligned with my values, beliefs, and the values of the majority of people on the island of Ireland. And that kind of comments that he gets all sometimes, I think his attitude benigns the fact that as an island, we are sometimes called the island of saints and scholars. That education is actually one of the key things. If you think of Irish people have exported around the world, Irish teachers, Irish priests, Irish missionaries, Irish charity workers, we are Irish poets. When you think about it, our literary background, education is something in Ireland that is massively, massively respected. And whereas I would say his level of respect globally would be a lot different to an Irish teacher. As someone who's traveled abroad, who's teaching as an Irish teacher, who's living abroad as well, I export my values, and my values of inclusivity, kindness, generosity, hospitality. And you get that with teachers. And the last thing I'll say is I work 50 to 60 hours a week. Michael O'Leary talks about hard work. Honestly speaking, he talks about cutting corners and getting things done quickly. My lessons are a bit like a Ryanair flight. By the time, those attendants, I sometimes think Ryanair flight attendants are like teachers, aren't they? All the multitasking that they do, all the things, and fair play to them. The flight attendants, I think, are fantastic people. When you have how they look after people, the irony is his flight attendants have to look after an airplane full of lots of people. So exactly the similar principle that we have. His flight attendants probably have league tables and probably get sacked if they don't meet certain quotas, just like us. So maybe he should be showing some empathy towards the teaching profession, the way that his flight attendants probably how long they would last in their job.
Well, I think Lucy's going to help us out in a minute with, qualities, characteristics, teachers, and so on. But before we come to that, if I said to you, those who can do and those who can't teach, I wonder would you know where that quote comes from? And rather embarrassingly, it comes from an Irish Nobel Prize-winning playwright, George Bernard Shaw. It's actually from his 1905 play, Man and Superman. Now, when you think about some people like Albert Einstein, Barack Obama, Marie Curie, J.K. Rowling, Sting, Liam Neeson, those people are all really high achievers in life, but they all came to industry from teaching. In fact, I think, Brent, you and Adam did a show recently, and you had an awful lot more names. I didn't know, for example, Brian Ferry was a teacher. But John, it makes me wonder then, should these so-called captains of industry, should they be commentating on education?
Well, if I were stuck in one of those old-fashioned railway carriages, and I find myself sitting opposite Michael O'Leary, I would bow to his experience in running a profitable but unpleasant airline. He knows more than I do about those things. Absolutely. If I found myself sitting opposite Musk, I would say, well, look, if he wanted to tell me about how to parlay massive privilege into stealing other people's ideas and making himself look like a genius, absolutely, you're the man for me. And if the guy Dyson, who makes sucky things that get dirt up the floor, wanted to tell me about vacuum cleaners, no problem at all. I would sit there and listen. You know about vacuum cleaners. On all other matters, keep it to yourself. Or your family. You're venturing beyond. There's a line in, I think it's Fiddler on the Roof, goes something like, if you're rich, they think you really know. And we're partly to blame. I mean, he says something like this, and we don't go, you're just some rich bloke. What do you care? What do you know about education or teachers? We're not going to listen to you. But, oh, no, it's the wealthy entrepreneur who somehow, having done something quite niche and narrow and not very well, now can speak on everything else. We have almost a cult in our culture of the very rich entrepreneur who somehow must know about other things. We can't help thinking that they know more than that narrow field of making money, which actually qualifies them very little. Whereas most teachers, on the other hand, have a broad self-learning approach to life that I've discovered, and a great and a significant collection of skills.
On that note, then, Lucy, what skills, qualities, capabilities, and so on do teachers have that very often makes them headhunted by the very businesses we're talking about?
Interestingly, Hannah and I talked about this the other day on our show. We were talking about the kind of the skills that we have, and apart from being excellent at teammates for a pub quiz, which is maybe not a life skill, but we decided was probably up there. I mean, it's everything. We could be here all day. We are organized. We are articulate. We can command a room. We can juggle things. We can think in ways that other people just can't. The creativity. I mean, I could go on and on and on. So O'Leary, it was a cheap shot. We all know it was a cheap shot. And I think he probably did it to get a bit of a reaction as well, because he's got nothing better to do. But my thing with these industries, again, we are in a ever-changing, fast-moving world. Why are you not collaborating with schools and coming in and talking about what you're doing and how you're doing it? I mean, I know a lot of these entrepreneurs didn't necessarily have a good time at school, but don't hide behind that excuse. Leverage it, use it as an opportunity to join forces, to inspire children to say, hey, look, I did this, and if you can kind of if you want to do this, here's how. If you want to come into these industries, certainly when it comes to secondary schools as well, why not team up instead of kind of vilifying us? Let's be friends, let's collaborate, let's do it together, because I think we need to see more of that, rather than telling us that we're just a bit useless.
Yes.
I think my final point is there's a narrative that always goes out there and the media court that narrative. We're a cushy number. We're not living in the real world. We get to go play detention. We sit in our backsides all day long in a cozy little classroom while people are out there grafting. Yeah. You want to think it's easy? Come into the classroom.
Have a go.
Come on into the classroom. There's a reason why 8%, 9% of teachers are leaving. It is a tough gig. It's a physical and mental tough gig. Yeah. And yet there is still that narrative, and you have people like Jeremy Clarkson, you have lots of celebrities lining up sometimes to teach your bash based upon their own, probably based on their own experiences, probably from some of them considering how wealthy they were and how privileged they were and how the doors open for them. They probably went to boarding schools back in the 70s and the 80s, God bless them, where they were the private education, because they're not exactly a working class kid like me who's a teacher trying to give it back. And that's the difference. I grew up as a plasterer's son and a housewife's son in a very, very troubled area. And yet I'm an educator. And I can tell you, my dad worked all the hours of the day as a grafter. And I respect other people's jobs. I respect different types of jobs and different types of work jobs. And because somebody's in a classroom doesn't make their job cushy, easy. And as I say, when it comes to pensions and guilt pensions, most of us don't have enough in the teaching profession, stay long enough to get those pensions and the benefits you get from teaching. So that is a narrative, I think, that has to be combated. And people like Michael O'Leary and others get the attention for this type of narrative. And sometimes that teaching bashing things is a media thing that needs to stop as well.
Again,
it's a bit of a sport, I always say. Yeah. I suppose the other thing, just to finish on this, is as JBL says, they're on holiday most of the time. Yeah. This was the other thing I think about when we think of education as a whole and we think of industry as a whole. Industry is still struggling to try and get a lot of its workforce out of their homes back into the office. When I think of how education as a whole coped with COVID crisis and school closure, we closed on the Thursday, and by Monday morning, every single one of our children had a timetable and had a teacher in front of him or her, and lessons were being taught. And the very moment we got the all clear, we were back into school. We had the majority in, we were looking after them, we were teaching, we were doing all this. I'm not sure industry has that kind of agility and that kind of unified ability to respond in that kind of magnificent, supportive way. Anyway, that's unfortunately all we have time for on that story this morning. Now, our final story caught my eye earlier this week. We need research-informed teaching that's specific to primary. And I thought, gosh, that's an interesting story. Turns out most research is conducted on pupils who are slightly older, and a process called the secondaryization of primary is happening. Love that word. I'm so glad that Emma put a hyphen in and didn't create a new word out of it. An implication of this then is that teaching in primary school is not always age or stage appropriate. And the consequences, of course, are that there may be loss of benefit for the learners. Now, things like attention, memory, even movement, for example, are important to learners in primary school in a way that's different from learners in post-primary. Lucy, as our primary expert, if I could come to you first, primary school teachers must know that the strategies that they're using that come from research in post-primary are not perfectly age and stage appropriate. Why are primary school teachers feeling the need to work in these new ways that are not really a perfect fit for the children that they teach?
I mean, there's a number of reasons, but there's certainly in recent times, I've seen a lot about the pressures on getting certainly year 5 and 6 reading levels up and making sure they're at a point, because a lot of children are going to secondary school unable to meet the reading and writing standards, and therefore secondary teachers are having to play catch up. So I think the pressure of things like that are filtering down, certainly with their math skills as well. There is a feeling that these kids just aren't ready for their secondary school life, and they're being prepped for that from as young as year 4. Certainly in counties where you still have things like the 11 plus and going to grammar schools, because I'm originally from Kent, where that is very much still a thing, and we're losing aspects of childhood. And certainly I'm also seeing in schools, I mean, I'm international, and the school I'm in at the moment, year 5 and 6 are taught in a secondary way, meaning that they move between classrooms, they have specialist teachers. And whilst I think there is an element of good things to that, I don't think that preparation needs to start really in primary school, certainly not in year 5. Maybe towards the end of year 6 you can start looking into that, but I don't think that needs to be the case necessarily. We are losing these children to the pressures of the higher ups and the pressures of what they need to do next, rather than living in the moment. And we are losing in primary school, because we're trying to do extra maths, extra reading, extra all of this, we are losing those creative subjects, and they're fobbed off into sort of PPA time and things like that, or there'll be a week of kind of the creative side of things here. And so I think the pressure on these children to focus in on the core subjects, as it were, is sad in a way, because children, I've always said this, children need to be able to read, write, and do basic arithmetic. That is undeniable. That will continue to be the case for a long time yet, even with AI and everything else coming in. But we need to focus in more on sort of, and I'm going to get in my hippy dippy mode here, the sort of the whole child and the holistic aspects, and where they are developmentally. My original background, my original degree was in childhood studies, kind of child development, and anything that I once learned seems to have gone out the window. It seems to this idea that how play is so important. When I first did my PGCE, I'll never forget my primary tutor, Andy Blore, who was out there somewhere. I think he's at Derby University now, heading up IPGCE. The first thing he made us do was to go out and play. And we all thought he was nuts. We all thought, well, what's he doing? He said, no. If you don't understand the importance of this, and you don't understand the importance of play and creativity in teaching and in child development, then I can't, the rest of this is a non-starter for you. And it is sad to see that it's just kind of, we're almost becoming it's becoming data driven. It's becoming more about sort of what you can see in the results, as we were talking about earlier, rather than this sort of whole child, where we are outside, we are doing musical things, we are doing creative things. So the balance has very much been lost, and I hope we can start to pull it back. But we're in a bit of a sort of strange picture at the moment.
Yes.
This story was put together by Emma Turner, who gave an example at the beginning of year 1 students sitting on the carpet. I felt so sorry for them. They're all sitting down on the carpet, and they had to watch an assembly on a screen. Then they had a maths lesson. It seemed to be coming through on the internet or something. And this whole thing lasted 75 minutes. That's an hour and 15 minutes. I felt so sorry for them, because at one point she says there's even workmen out in the playground. You've got all these little kids watching the workmen, and it's so much more engaging and exciting. And you can imagine that all love to be out learning about what's going on there. And on that then, John, with this kind of secondaryization of primary schooling and teaching and so on, this must be a disservice. I mean, Lucy's already pointed out many ways. This must be a disservice to these young children.
It is a disservice, and we really are not doing well in this area. And as Lucy points out, it is the dominance of outputs driven, the hegemony of data and outputs, and a retrospectivization of childhood, that somehow we must get childhood right and forget our own experiences of being children. Very curious thing is that we all were children, and yet we forget so much about what it was actually like. We all were teenagers, and we forget what that was actually like in trying to mold them into whatever the latest desire to improve the economy. If we want to think about education in younger kids, and I'm significantly unqualified to comment in this way, but never, that doesn't stop me. And that is, I would say, look at the television program Teletubbies. Teletubbies came out at the turn of the century, 1997 or whatever. It was a sort of intuitive leap into the dark. People clutched their pearls and said kids will talk in babble, and they'll be encouraged to watch television, and they won't know how to speak and such like. And yet it became one of the possibly the most successful young child's television programs, because the creators of that program had somehow grasped the innocence and playfulness and fantasy of childhood. And it had very little. There was a little bit of it. There was very little sort of didactic. You must learn this. It got away from the kind of Sesame Street, and now Mr. Q comes along, and Mr. Q needs a U behind him, and so on. All this stuff that's going to teach them to spell or read or something. This was purely the minds of children, slightly bonkers, playful, exploratory, fun, and so surround kids with love and play. And a bit of reading and arithmetic, but essentially we overpressure kids too early, too much in this country.
Yeah, they say curiosity killed the cat, but I have a funny feeling we're actually killing curiosity.
Absolutely.
Brent, is it not a case of the dye is in the water here now? This is the way primary school is being taught. And in order to go back to something akin to what Lucy and John are kind of illustrating there, this is going to be a mammoth task. How could, we give teachers the confidence, the inspiration, take away the dragons of Ofsted to allow them, as I think they all do believe, children need engagement, curiosity, fun, play, outdoor. Get out there and watch those workmen working and learn in different ways. How can this happen?
I think we've ignored the neuroscience. I think we're ignoring the evidence. I mean, although I'm going to disagree with John, because, who doesn't love a bit of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. One Irish teacher. 2 Irish teachers. Who doesn't love a bit of Sesame Street? Let's be honest. But that's the thing. It was fun. And I think the fun's gone out of things. I think children are now product. They're being business. I mean, I can take my own experience of my own daughter, who loves learning and then gets in and sats and it destroys her confidence and destroys her love of maths. The problem is, and you say the die is cast, is that the die is cast, unfortunately, too early. Primary school is infinitely more important than secondary school, because I'm picking up the pieces of what was done or not done in primary school. I'm picking up the pieces, whether the child had a book read to them, whether they have the cultural capital, and whether they have the parents have had the sort of nous to enrich the child's education, because it takes a community to raise a child. Too often now it seems to be the responsibility of schools. I had an example with a student the other day. I was trying to teach the feudal system. It says, right, could you tell me what your national anthem is? I was trying to get them to understand the King, God, and the relationship. The kid turns around and says, I haven't been taught that. You're 12 years old and you don't know your own national anthem. I'm like thinking to myself, whose responsibility was that? Is that British values? Am I meant to teach that as part of the British values thing? And then you realize that we have a generation of children now who learn because they're told to learn, because they have to learn, not because they want to learn or enjoy learning. And then we wonder why there are mental health problems later on in life. We wonder why we have the most examined children in Western Europe and yet the most unhappiest, because their lives are basically controlled, measured, and controlled, measured. They are product. And that is robbing them. I'll give you a number. 1967, Piaget came up with cognitive development. 1967, that's nearly 60 odd years ago, that we knew that there were stages of development of a child's development and what we should be doing. And yet they're completely ignoring the science. They're completely ignoring the lessons of teaching to just basically quantify things so they can have, again, the league tables, the Ofsted. Education is about a journey. Education is about the development of a person, but no more important than the first couple of years of life. And if you don't get those first couple of years of life and education right, then people like myself in secondary school are triage. We are just patching it up. We are not getting to the root core of the problem. And that's what I'm having to do sometimes, is to say to young people who are stressed, I'm going to sit down and have a cup of tea with you, but we've got this to do. Just calm down. You're all right. I failed my 11 plus. I went to a primary school in the middle of the countryside where I learned how to do nature walks. I learned how to talk, communicate. And then I went home to a mother who was a housewife. She did my homework with me. And I'm not saying that that was an idyllic childhood. We had other difficulties as well, but my parents had time with me. My schooling was broad and balanced and was based on many principles, but it wasn't based upon passing exams. And I thank my lucky stars I went to that little countryside primary school, which no longer exists, because it imbued me with a sense of the world. I think now the way I am, the why I am, the way I am, is because of those early years I went to that primary school, that small countryside primary school.
Yeah.
Yes,
there you go.
Just picking up on that comment, sorry, that Piaget was outdated, then why are we still learning about it in PGCEs? I mean, granted, it's not as much of a feature, but why are we still having lectures on, Piaget, Vygotsky, all these people? Because it is still relevant. Yes, there are critics, and that, like with all these theories, there are critics, but they are there for a reason. And I would urge anybody who is, who doesn't know who these people are, go and have a look, because you'd be shocked at what you'd learn. And there are bits of it that are a bit okay, and there are kind of, in some ways we have moved on and we've learned other things, but the crux of that is still absolutely crucial. And maybe we do need to do more research in primary, and maybe there are, we need to allow for teachers to do that, certainly in primary school, where teachers are short of time, full stop. But if you want this research done, who better place than the teachers who are in those classrooms? But give us the capacity to do that, and we will show you what is happening in our classrooms. We've got nothing to hide.
Yes, and Gove is the chap that said, we've had enough of experts. I mean, he's the sort of anyone can teach. There's a common sense chap can do it.
Well, that's what I was going to say, John. Yeah. And I mean, he is the guy that said, Piaget is outdated, but he's outdated now. How long is it going to be before we see him on Big Brother or looking for some other silly source?
But here's the problem. He's outdated, but he's left behind a curriculum that's outdated, which is currently still educating children and deriving them out. I mean, this is the problem with these children, is that they don't get a second chance with this. And that's the problem with our education system, is that too many people have come in and had political reasons for changing the education system, as opposed to academic, scientific, or pedagogical reasons for changing the education system. And we need to return to the pedagogical and the scientific and the logical and the evidence-based rather than the political-based.
I wanted to pick up something you said earlier there, Brent. And really, John and Lucy have alluded to it as well. It's that homogenization, that kind of oneness that is really, really slow creeping into teaching now, where, primary schools are taking what happens in junior schools, and then we're all trying to do the same thing. We're on our TV programs, we're on this, that, and the other, but Pink Floyd warned us as well in The Wall about the dangers of teaching and fears that children had and all the rest of it. Why are governments wanting to turn us into little robots? Why are they afraid of highly developed people? Brent, can I come to you on that first?
If I was cynical and I was Orwellian about it, I'd say a highly critical society, highly educated society is harder to control. No more example than somebody sitting with you right now who's probably a nightmare to manage. Why is that? Because I was imbued with the questions that my parents always kept asking me, why? I know that as a social scientist. If you have an educated workforce who demand higher standards, then the people in charge are going to have to up their game. And I think, unfortunately, across the Western world, I don't think this is a UK wide. I think if you look at the United States, you look at that. There's a definite social media sort of I don't know what to call it, a dumbing down of society, and yet a higher accountability for people like ourselves, but not those in charge. There's a definite scenario there, and also people are being encouraged to be polarized, stop thinking for themselves, adopt other people's opinions. As you say, we don't listen to experts any longer. And we as a profession are vulnerable because we are critical thinkers. We are people who sometimes went into education because we want to answer the questions. We are curious and we want the curiosity in our children. I love it when children put their hands up. But I might have turned to and say, I'm sorry, I can't answer your question now because according to my lesson plan, I'm 6 minutes behind and I've got to ask you 16 retrieval questions. Got to make sure that the evidence is in my exercise book because when Ofsted come in, they will say I've done a bad lesson, even though you've got probably a very pertinent question to ask. But no, I've got a no hands up policy now because I'm instructed to have a no hands up policy, and I'm going to ask you to put your hand down because we've got a no hands up policy. That's what's happening.
Just the anxiety of you running through that, just yeah. I mean, it's the silence and compliance thing again, isn't it? It's, if you have got a sort of a cookie cutter set of people, then it's nothing changes. Nothing. There's no, and I do actually think, and this is probably a bit controversial, but I do think in many ways a revolution is coming because it has to, because there might not be many of us at the moment, but I do think there are rumblings happening where people are thinking, well, hang on a minute, this is actually a bit crap. And this is actually not right. But it's kind of finding those other people and getting together and saying, we need to change. And in order to enact change, we need to, there needs to be, as history will tell you, there needs to be a lot of you, and there needs to be a lot of noise, and there needs to be a lot of, actually, you are wrong. And actually, it does need to be done differently, because otherwise we're just going to kind of sort of blindly continue zombieing forward into, well, I don't know what.
Yes.
Well, there is something of the revolution.
But I do think that is where we are.
And I'd add to that yes, absolutely. And a pervasive sense of discontent and that something must change. The danger is that what you get is Trump, and what you get is Andrew Tate, and what you get is Nigel Farage, and so on. There is a feeling that something is significantly wrong, and people sense it. They may not be able to articulate it. They may misdirect their sense of discontent, but they know something is wrong with an education system, and so much more.
And
I think on the horizon, but we probably have some kind of sense that, as Lucy says, change is on the way. When you listen to Brent earlier and, the way he talks about Ofsted and so on, and I mean, they're pretty much the weapon that keeps us in line. When you think of things like, critical literacy, critical thinking are being woven into the curriculum, well, I think if teachers are going to stand up to Ofsted, things like critical literacy and thinking are in the curriculum, in a short generation, we are going to produce a very different type of citizen. And, that can only be good, I think. Brent, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, if in a nightmare scenario, we're top of the list of people that they come for. We are top of the list of people that they always.
Well, the DFE's already coming for you, aren't they?
Yeah.
Because we all have the ability. When you look at actually revolutionaries, I know that the uprising in Ireland was led by a head teacher, wasn't it? And you look at its professionals. It's always people like ourselves. The Mandelas was a lawyer. Gandhi was a lawyer. The intellectual people, the intelligent people are sometimes the ones that get attacked. And that's, we saw that in fascist regimes, because we have that ability to lead, inspire others, and that ability to break the control. So maybe that's one of the reasons why they're not so concerned about the recruitment retention problem in education. Maybe they want to holler at education because a bunch of educated, motivated teachers is going to try and help educate and motivate and try and get the next generation to demand higher standards. Why are they not so concerned about that? Why are they not so concerned about that? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I actively know that. So that's one of the reasons I stay in education, because I feel it even more, that my job has become even more important in these times. So when others run away, I'll run towards, because I get the sense that we're needed. We're definitely needed to counterbalance those forces which are trying to misinform, to corrupt people. And I think we have to save those good people from being corrupted, which means education is of vital, if not even more importance, to counter that.
Yes.
Well, if we were being inspected this morning, we would be in trouble, because we have run way over time. But I think we knew we would run over time this morning. So that's good reflection, good consideration, and good implementation into our forward lessons. However, we'll be back after this brief break with some very short and sharp reviews of shows of the week. I'll start off. I listened to Adam and Brent's show this week. They tackled two very thorny issues, that is parents and complaints and so on. Very, very thorny issue. If you've time, great show to listen to. An awful lot in it, and some great advice if you are coming under pressure from parents. Brent, what about you? What have you listened to this week?
Well, I listened to, but also helped to participate in, and I think that's why it's important that we flag it up, was Chris Wilkinson's SteamYard show, which you and I, Paul, also chipped into, and that was on the men's awareness and International Men's Day. And as just three men, we decided that we would unpick what it's like to be educators, men, fathers, just the overall kind of experience of men. So really good advice in there, honest, open, candid, relaxed. And obviously, as men who were, trying to practice what we preach, we were trying to sort of get to the crux of how we can help each other. So it wasn't so much, it got bromance near the end when we started talking football, of course, which got a bit of criticism, but it is worth a listen to. And I'd say if any of you are struggling out there, any men in education who are struggling out there, it's worth a listen. And the advice that we were obviously saying, seek help, talk to people, get out, and there's lots in there that might help you if you are struggling.
Good. Lissy, what about you? What's caught your ear?
It was lovely for Teachers Talk Radio to welcome back one of our old hosts, Harry Waters. Some of you may remember from a while back. And he teamed up with Tom Rogers for a sort of eco-educators shaping the future show. And also, I'm going to get his name wrong, so I apologize for the pronunciation, Sachin Bhopal Myers, who is a young climate activist. And they were talking about his climate activism, how important it is to talk about sustainability within education. So another big topic that should be featuring more across all of our education as the world changes. So well worth a listen. Do go and check it out.
Good, thank you. John, what would you recommend this week?
I'll recommend Claire Cannon's Friday Twilight show, which was Teachers as Learners, and it was a reflection on people who have experience of teaching in Sweden. But actually, the focus was mainly, I think one of the guests didn't show up, and the guest who was there, Martin, talked about his long career in teaching. And it was a lovely exploration of his experiences. And the only suggestion I would say to its improvement is every 10 minutes or so, they should have had Martin suggest a piece of music that he would have taken away from him with a sort of distant location if he got stuck there. Other than that, it was perfect radio.
Great. Thank you very much. That's all we've time for on this slightly extended version of the weekly review. We do hope you liked the show, and if you did, please leave us a comment. Thank you very much to our sponsors, John Catt Books and Parent Kind, to our outstanding panelists, Lucy, John, and Brent. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next Sunday, same time, same place. Goodbye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.